On this episode of the NHC GOP podcast. Before the podcast, you held up your finger. It's the finger with the callus on it that you use to press. There it is.
We were the number one city in the nation for opioid abuse. And that's not much to be proud of.
No.
Another thing that we overrode that I just could not fathom that, once again, the liberal Democrats support, and that is gender transition in minors. I mean, these children are not 18 years old. I don't think that they're mature enough to decide whether or not they want to happen. Some of this stuff's irreversible, and that is a good point because they don't want competition. But Cooper does not want public schools to have competition. They want it to be the only game in town, and he wants to be able to tell parents, this is where your child's going to go. Seriously, will consider voting for me because, to me, I don't talk the talk, I walk the walk.
Welcome to the NHC GOP podcast. I'm Reuel Sample. I am with a man who I can only describe as a statesman of statesmen who gets better looking every time I get together with him. Representative Ted Davis. Good evening, Ted. Welcome.
Hey, Reuel, I wish you knew me when I had hair.
Well, but it makes you look distinguished, sir. It gives you that classic look of governance.
Well, I appreciate that. Of course, I could say I had a full set of hair before I got into politics.
So you are running for re-election for District 20 here
Yes.
in the state of North Carolina. You have done a heck of a lot of work up there in the state. I wanted to start with a big one that has hit the airways. It's this immigration bill.
Immigration enforcement measure would force all sheriffs in North Carolina to cooperate with federal immigration officials, ICE, in cracking down on crime. Specifically, the legislation requires that sheriffs temporarily hold, up to 48 hours, inmates identified as being in the country without legal status and also considered violent criminals who are arrested for violent felonies or serious misdemeanors such as assault on a female or violating a protective order.
North Carolina is dealing with border issues right now. We're dealing with thousands of people who are in the state who shouldn't be here. And we're dealing, unfortunately, with folks who are here who aren't supposed to be here and are committing serious crimes.
So this is part of the education bill that we talked about with Senator Lee the other day. This was all part of that bill, and this part requires sheriffs to notify ICE. It seems common sense, Ted. Why did you have to put this into a bill?
Well, you raise an interesting question. You also raise a good point. The problem was that you had sheriffs, Democrat sheriffs, in this state that refused to cooperate with ICE, meaning if there was a person that they had incarcerated and that person had a federal detainer on it, if they would be released from the local jail, then those sheriffs would not cooperate by keeping those people until the feds could come in and take custody of that individual. And you're talking about criminals, serious criminals, murderers, rapists, stealing. And what would happen is these people would be released and they go out and commit more crimes. And so the Republicans said, we can't have this. So we introduced that bill, and it was part of House Bill 10 that you're referring to. And of course, we knew that Governor Cooper was going to veto it, and of course he did. So because we now have a supermajority, meaning we have enough Republicans votes in the House and in the Senate that we don't need a Democrat vote to override a veto, we overrode House Bill 10. And I just can't believe it. It's just the immigration problem is a very serious problem. I don't think people really appreciate how serious it is because you look at the crime that they bring in, look at the drugs that are coming in, the fentanyl that's coming across the borders now. These are just very, very, very serious issues. But that's just one of the big differences between liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans. The Democrats are happy to let it keep on going on. We Republicans are not. So we're going to go back, October the 9th, and we'll override that veto. And I'll be tickled to death once again to press that green button.
Every state is a border state. North Carolina, Wilmington is one of the biggest trafficking cities in North Carolina, and it's unbelievable that you folks even have to consider a veto override. This has nothing to do with the Hispanic population. This has nothing to do with just routine traffic stops. This is about violent criminals who are in our country illegally to begin with, and you're just holding them accountable.
That is correct. But I know that when we heard the bill in committee, I'm on the Rules Committee, and we heard it before it went to the floor, and the room was full of Hispanics, and they spoke against the bill like it was going to, like it was something directed against them or going to deter them living here. I mean, it was just, I don't know where they hear all this. I know there's so much misinformation out there. A lot of it is put out by the liberal Democrats to try to incite people. But anyway, I'm tickled to death that we passed it, and I'm going to be even happier when we overrule it, the veto, and this will go into effect. And hopefully we will see a drop in a lot of the criminal activity that's going on by illegal aliens that are in this country.
This is going, you haven't overridden this yet, but this is going to be yet another series of vetoes. Before the podcast, you held up your finger. It's the finger with the callus on it that you use to press, there it is. You have overridden to date 26 vetoes, is that correct?
26 veto overrides. And that was only done in this 2023 session, and that's just because we had a Democrat representative to switch parties and to being a Republican. That gave us we have a supermajority by one person. We have a supermajority in the Senate by one person. And that's why I said earlier, it is so important, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. But yes, we've done 26 veto overrides, and a couple of those things, Reuel, that I just can't believe that we had to do this in the first place, just like you were talking about with the ICE, is transgender men in women's sports. I mean, this is something that the liberal Democrats support wholeheartedly. I mean, what is fair about a man competing against women? It's nothing against transgender people. It's just talking about a fair playing field. You know, you heard the situation about the lady volleyball player that went to a concussion from a male transgender guy hitting the ball and hitting her in the head. It was so hard. You've heard about the swimmer who came up and talked to us in the legislature that she and a transgender man were tied, and who they give the award to? They gave it to the man, transgender man. What should he be out there competing against women in women's sports? But once again, that was something that we passed. Of course, the governor vetoed it,
which is unbelievable. And that's a subject. I don't care whether you're Republican or a Democrat. If you are a dad and you've got your daughter in sports, what the Democrats want you to believe is that it's okay for a guy to go in and change the women's locker room.
Sure,
and then also
together.
Yeah, taking showers, and these are I mean, they still have all their parts, and they're in there, and they are participating. And in the case of the volleyball student, she still has and will have lifetime problems after a concussion in the face from a volleyball from a guy hitting it at her. And the Democrats wanted that to be okay, and you folks overrode it.
That's true. I mean, it's all this wokeness that I just do not understand. Another thing that we overrode that I just could not fathom that once again, the liberal Democrats support, and that is gender transition in minors. I mean, these children are not 18 years old. I don't think that they're mature enough to decide whether or not they want to happen. Some of this stuff's irreversible.
Yeah.
You know, but this Democrat woke is, oh, that's okay. You know, if Johnny wants to be Susie and he's, 17 years old, then let him treat Johnny so he can become Susan, or Susan become Johnny. I mean, it's just, I tell you, I just don't understand. I say sometimes this country's going to hell in a handbag. I mean, when you've got liberal Democratic people that want to be in power, that support this kind of stuff, I worry about my grandchildren. And I'm not being facetious when I say that. I'm worried sick about the future of my grandchildren with this kind of stuff that they're growing up in.
Yeah.
But if Republicans don't keep control, good conservatives, this is what we're going to be facing.
And we need to emphasize is that if you're an adult and if you want to live as a transgender or however you want to do that, that's your choice. You're an American, and we will protect your right to live that way.
If
But
you're over 18.
if you're over 18, but if you're a child, I mean, some of the things that are happening to these children, they're getting sterilized. Things are getting done to them. In another age, the folks would go to jail for child abuse. But again, the Democrats are saying this is okay.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's yet another bill that you folks have continued to override, not because you don't like Cooper and because you don't like the Democrats, but you are passing bills that the vast majority of North Carolinians would agree with.
That is correct.
And we might as well talk about it now. Is that there's big names at the top of the ticket, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, and we've got other folks around. But in order to help them get their jobs done, we've got to get Republicans elected at all levels of government. Is that if things go south for us here in North Carolina, we need a good, strong supermajority in both the House and the Senate here in North Carolina.
That's especially true if Josh Stein is governor,
Mhm.
because Josh Stein is more liberal than Cooper. And if he does get to be governor, that means he can veto every good conservative Republican bill that we pass. And if we don't have the supermajority in both chambers to overrule that, we will never be able to get a good conservative Republican bill passed into legislation as long as he's the governor. That's how important this election is as far as the House and the Senate. People need to understand that, and please go out and vote for your Republican House members and vote for your Republican senators. Because once again, we only have it in both chambers, in each chamber
by just one. That's just
one.
that is just too slim. That's just too slim. Another part of that bill that you folks
the
are
House
doing.
and Senate approved an expansion of those school voucher or opportunity scholarships. It would clear a backlog of 55,000 voucher applications covering families of every income level. The bill would boost vouchers by about $463 million. Lawmakers did agree to boost public education enrollment by $92 million.
That is getting panned by the liberal left as the Republicans pandering to rich families who want to send their kids to elite schools, but just the opposite is that you folks expanded education here in North Carolina.
The Democrats talk about opportunity scholarships and money that is being funded for the opportunity scholarships. That is something that is taking away money from public schools and will ruin public schools, especially in the rural areas. And the fact of the matter is, Republicans believe in school choice. In other words, as a parent, you should have the right to decide, will my child go to public school? Will my child go to private school? Will my child go to a charter school? Or will my child be homeschooled? Because no one size fits all. The Democrats want you to go to public school, and that's it. They don't want you as a parent to have the choice of what to do with your child's education, as it depends on that child's particular set of circumstances. And the proof in the pudding to me is, it's unfortunate, but you got people leaving public schools, which says something in and of itself. But when the money was originally appropriated for the opportunity scholarships, which once again, the school choice, it was directed more towards your lower income families. Well, what happened was with the money that was appropriated, it just zapped up. It was gone. And you had thousands upon thousands upon thousands of parents that wanted their children to also have that opportunity. So that is why in the that House Bill 10 that we're talking about, it appropriated more money, $248 million, more money, so that more children would have the opportunity to participate in that Opportunity Scholarship Program. One of the differences was, though, it was directed not only to your lower income families, but any family could apply for it. And one thing that the Democrats are not telling you is it is on a pay scale. In other words, if someone who makes more money has a child that gets one of those scholarships, they will not get as much as a lower income person would. Once again, the more income the family has, the less money you can get out of that scholarship. And a lot of people say, well, why should taxpayer money go to people of higher incomes for their children? Well, who's been paying this? I mean, who has been paying the taxes to fund the original Opportunity Scholarships to go to people that make less income? They're not paying taxes or very little taxes. So why shouldn't the people that have been footing the bill be able to get a little skin in the game and be able to have their children get some of the benefit?
I also find it interesting that a lot of the voices against school choice are sending their own kids to private schools.
That's true. That is true.
So
I think it's unfortunate that a lot of children or parents want their children to have a choice other than public schools. I hate to say it, but it doesn't make public schools look good. But my children went to public school. My daughter did go to St. Mary's, which is a private school here for middle school. But other than that, both of them, as I did, went to public schools, and they got a good education.
Well, in a way, it's doing a couple things. Is that it's not taking money away from local counties. Is that if they have one less student in the school, that they have actually more funding for schools. But in the other thing is that we as Republicans, we believe in competition, and this in a way is fostering competition and excellence, not just in our private schools, but in a way to get public schools performing better.
And that is a good point, because they don't want competition.
Yeah.
Cooper does not want public schools to have competition. They want it to be the only game in town, and he wants to be able to tell parents, this is where your child's going to go, and that's it. And it doesn't work like that. Competition is good. You're exactly right. And one thing that bill also did, Reuel, is that while it did not give teachers an increase in salary, which personally I wanted, the House passed a mini bill that had that in it, but the Senate would not go along with that part of it. But what it does, while it may not address more money to teachers per se, it does provide $95 million in a fund to help K through 12 enrollment growth. Because if that money was not there, let's say a school had 50 people, and they were getting funding for that 50 people, and then let's say they get 2 more students, and you got 60 students, where they're only getting 50, funding for the 50. So what this will do will ensure that if you have enrollment growth, that the schools will get funding for that increased enrollment, so that they'll have that money to be able to supply for the students.
And once again, with all the other issues that we've been talking about, this is an issue that crosses party lines. What parent does not want their kids to do better than themselves? And getting a good education is the start of it. I don't care who you are, whether you have an R or a D, you want your students to excel in schools, and the only way to do that is to have an excellent school system.
That is correct. But unfortunately, your liberal Democrats and Cooper, they don't want that. They want a one shoe fits all. And I catch all kinds of grief every day from people who say, why are you taking money away from public schools? Well, please tell me how this takes money away from public schools. It's just more and more of this stuff that Cooper and the Democrats are feeding the people to get them all riled up and upset, and so they'll vote against Republicans.
Well, I'm convinced that one of the reasons is that good governance does not make for good sound bites. Reaction to good governance makes for good sound bites. But what you folks are doing takes some time to understand and digest, but in the end, it's the right process.
Yeah, and another thing about that bill that we were talking about that it does, as you know, rural areas that are very much in need of high-speed internet. And this bill provides that funding.
Now, see, I didn't know that.
Nobody talks about that. Do you think Cooper and the Democrats are going to tell you this stuff? Like about the $95 million for the K through 12 enrollment growth funds? They don't talk about that. They're not going to talk about this funding in this particular bill for the high-speed internet to the rural areas, which they need desperately to become part of the statewide system. The money that's in there for that. It's also got money to address the shortfall in Medicaid expansion. They don't talk about that. All they want to harp on is we're not going to support ICE. We'd rather criminals be released so they go out and commit more crimes. And we're against this opportunity scholarships because we don't want that to happen. If people would just do their homework, please, and not believe everything you hear on the internet.
You could believe this. You could believe this podcast. We're on the internet.
True. I mean, we're an exception.
Well,
people read this stuff and they just take everything as being true. They don't look at the facts. They don't look behind the scene to see what's really there. And then they just come out with all this stuff. And it's just nothing. And they just feed right into what the Democrats are giving to them.
One of the other things that's on people's mind is the economy. And I'm going to play this. This is from just a few months ago. Let me bring this one up.
Local economic experts believe we are not out of the woods when it comes to inflation. UNC Charlotte today hosting its quarterly economic forecast. Professor of Financial Economics Dr. John Connaughton says while the data shows inflation has cooled down significantly from its peak in 2022, it is yet to fall to the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. Recently, it has held steady around 3%. He says there are now fewer goods going down in price and more goods rising in price, which could be a sign inflation could make a return later this year.
My wife just bought eggs today, and the price just went up yet again. It just goes up and down, up and down. The Fed just recently reduced interest rates, but that's probably going to have the reverse effect on inflation. But you and I were talking about before the podcast started is that the Republicans have sort of inflation-proofed North Carolina through your economic policies, reserves, lower taxes. Talk more about that.
Right. I know, I guess to give us a comparison point, when I first went to the legislature, I was appointed in 2012, first elected in 2013. Our state was $2.4 billion with a B dollars in debt.
Amazing.
That we owe that to the federal government, having to pay interest on that. Well, because we being the Republicans, we reduced your individual income taxes. We reduced the corporate income taxes. We did reg reform. We were able to pay off that debt. I believe it was less than 2 years. To start, instead of being in debt under the previous Democrat regime, we started having a surplus. And that has built up through the years. And I remember at one point, Cooper, when he was governor, chastised the legislature time and time again, said, why have you got all that money over there? Why aren't you spending it? Why aren't you buying this? Why aren't you buying that? Well, the proof of the pudding came after we had the hurricanes and some other natural disasters. And guess what? Because we had that excess money, that fund, we were able to help people that needed it, and we did not have to raise taxes, and we did not have to cut services. And that's why we keep a surplus. Because a lot of people say, like now, well, you've got all these billions of dollars. Why aren't you increasing teacher pay? Or why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? Well, we don't do that because we're conservatives. And just because you got money don't mean you got to spend it.
Well, yeah,
and like I just said, Reuel, that was proof in the pudding of why we do what we do.
We find that at all levels of when Republicans are in power. Here in New Hanover County, we have a surplus in reserve so that when we get hurricanes, and we get them all the time, we can do the same exact thing that the state can do, is that we can respond without cutting services, and we do all that and still cut taxes at the same time. It's amazing, because what we find is that when you cut income tax, state revenue actually increases, doesn't it?
Well, all of those things together are why in the 2 previous years, we were the #1 state in the nation to do business in. We fell to number 2 this time. It wasn't by much. And the reason was, once again, if you cut taxes and if you take away reg reform that really hurts businesses starting here, but I'm not talking about anything that would affect the environment. I'm talking about anything other than that. You have businesses coming here, and that's what we've done, and that's why our economy is so good. If you look at the announcements that are made almost weekly, you've got businesses that are coming in here and putting huge investments in the state. You've got businesses that are expanding here with big investments in the state. And that is why we are in such good shape that we're in. And that is why we did set aside money in a fund so that if this inflation does hit as bad and the recession as bad as what might happen, there will be money there to keep us going.
Without having to raise taxes.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Or cut services. But that's being proactive, and that's what Republicans are. We don't react after the fact. We try to, as much as we can, to be proactive before the fact. Like having that money there to get ready, like if we have another hurricane or any type of natural disaster. And in this case, with the inflation or recession, because if you don't do that and those things happen, then we're going to be in a boatload of trouble.
Now, because you are on a 2-year term, you have to go through this election cycle every 2 years. But you have had a lot of things to do over these last 2 years. What's some of the legislation that you are most proud of?
One of the local things that I've been very proud of, you mentioned earlier about the drug problem. Unfortunately, we were the #1 city in the nation for opioid abuse. And that's not much to be proud of.
No.
The city of Wilmington came to me and asked me if I would help them to get funding for what was called a pilot opioid epidemic project. And what it does is if I take an overdose and I am treated usually with Narcan, to bring me back, then I am told about this program. It's run by Coastal Horizons. And what they do is you go to that, and hopefully at the end of that course, you will no longer be addicted to opioids, which means you can go get a job, be a productive member of the community, go to school, whatever you want to do. And I was able to get the funding for that. And I got that for multiple years. And I had told the people here that if we had a good track record, maybe 3 or 4 years, then I was going to try to get, number 1, increase funding. Number 2, make it a recurring, which means it would stay in the budget year after year after year after year after year. We wouldn't have to go back every 2 years, beg, borrow, and steal to try to get the money. And also no longer be a pilot project, be a permanent project. And I was able to do all those things in the last budget. And I'm really proud of that because it's been a hugely successful program. But I've always tried, that's why I got into this, is I like helping people. I mean, Good Shepherd came to me and said, can you get us some money to help us build some shelters for low-income families? And I was able to do that. The food bank, money for them to build their new facility.
You were also at the forefront of our water issue down here in New Hanover County as well.
Yes, and actually I ran a bill that gave DEQ the first funding that they that they received for dealing with the PFAS situation. It was I had several people that had been up there a long time say it's the first time they can ever remember an environmental bill passing the House with no votes against it.
Sponsored by a Republican.
Responsible by a Republican. But, it's the thing that's been disappointing for me is that I've introduced a bill that bottom line would hold a polluter responsible for the cost to a public utility to treat the water. And in this case, the only one I know of in this area is Comores.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it through the Environment Committee this time. It passed unanimously. We never made it to the House floor because it was getting near the end of the session. But the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce is so against that, as is a business alliance, not the local, but statewide.
Mm-hmm.
They are so against that bill. They have lobbyists going out talking to legislators. They don't support this bill. It'll hurt business. And what gets me, Reuel, is that every year since I've been up there, the chamber recognizes pro-business legislators. Call them jobs champions.
Yes.
I've gotten it every year. That business alliance every 2 years gives pro-business recognition to legislators. I've gotten it every time. And like I said in that committee, when both of them were there opposing, I said, you know what? I've got a very good track record of being pro-business. If this was not, if this was an anti-business thing, I don't think I'd be up here standing. Doing this because I got proof in the pudding by all these recognitions that you people have given me ever since I've been up here. I said, this is not, I said, what business would want to come here if they didn't think the people that work for them had clean drinking water?
Yeah.
What business would want to stay here and expand if they didn't think that their employees were going to have good drinking water? And it just really disappoints me in our state Chamber of Commerce and also that business alliance that they take that stance that they would rather businesses not have something that might affect them rather than protecting the people that work for those businesses and are members of those organizations having clean drinking water.
But on the other hand, you are fully supported by the National Federation of Independent Business, NFIB, that stands and works for small business. You're supported by other small business organizations. It's flabbergasting that the chamber and other business organizations think it's bad business to have clean water. It's astounding.
I don't get it, but I can tell you this: if reelected, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna file that bill again. I'm gonna be like a pit bull gnawing on your leg. I'm not gonna let those people keep me down.
Well, let's
keep the ratepayers here, and then also Brunswick County Reuel. Their rates went up as New Hanover County, Cape Fear Public Utility Authority. Both of them because of the equipment that each utility in those two counties have had to spend to clean the water that these polluters contaminate. And it's not fair for the ratepayers to have to pay that. The polluters should pay for that.
Yeah, and let's make sure that people understand the seriousness of the chemicals that we're talking about. There are some chemicals that will wash out of your system in days, months, or weeks, but these PFAS chemicals, they're called lifetime chemicals. They don't go. They're forever chemicals. They don't go away. They don't go away. They just build up in your system. And that's what you are fighting to get fixed.
When that thing first came out about Gen X, we didn't know what it was. And make a long story short, I went to Speaker Moore and said, look, this issue is very important in New Hanover County, and it's also important in our surrounding counties. I'd like for you to allow me to form a committee to study this issue since we don't know what the heck's going on. And he allowed that. It was called the River Quality Committee, and I chaired it. And we had DEQ come in, we had toxicologists come in, all kinds of experts to come in. It was fascinating. And we really, through that committee, learned at least what Gen X is and PFAS is. We toured one of the facilities and they showed us spectrometers, how they detect this in the water. It was fascinating. And it was out of that study that that bill that I first filed with the funding was passed. It's just, and it's everywhere, Reuel. It's just unbelievable. The more and more they're finding of these chemicals that are in there, and you're right. It's very serious, and it's something that we need to deal with. And I do salute Cape Fear Public Utility Authority in the fact that they did put in charcoal filter system that takes out almost all of it, if not all of it.
Yes.
And I'm very thankful for that. And there are other procedures. As we go along, science is finding more different ways to deal with these things, these chemicals. But once again, the polluter should be responsible.
Yes. Yes. I again, and I find it just fascinating that an environmental bill is coming from the Republicans, but it's not a feel-good bill. It is a bill that's going to take some time to get done, but it's going to get done. Now, you are running for re-election. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to in your next 2 years? What's on your plate?
Well, I mean, the thing that I really look at is, of course, dealing with the inflation in the economy. Because I know that's one of the biggest concerns that people have. It's a concern that I have. So I firmly believe if we can keep our good conservative Republican policies going, we'll continue to attract the businesses, continue to provide jobs, and of course that will allow people to be employed, allow people to to earn money. They spend money. They have the fallout effect of helping everyone and keep us going there. Of course, as we've talked about, cleaning water is a very major concern of mine and something that I want to deal with. I'm worried about the crime and the illegal drugs. A large part, I believe, has to do with illegal immigration. And I want to keep fighting to keep our community safe, our community to live in, and to raise our children in. And as things come up, like all these bills that we have overridden the vetoes on, and other bills, I will keep doing that.
That finger's going to get more. That finger's going to get more calloused.
You got that right. If that's what it takes, I'll put a Band-Aid on that thing if I have to. But really, that's once again, it's one of the biggest fears I have, that if Stein wins and we don't have that supermajority, then we're just going landlocked. We're not going to be able to do anything.
Again, we need every Republican to vote for Republicans up and down the ballot, because that's the only way we can get it done.
You're absolutely correct. And locally, we need the school board.
Mm-hmm.
We need the county commissioners. I mean, from the top to the bottom, we really do. Because look at the stuff that's going on in our schools.
Yep. Representative Ted Davis Jr. running for District 20 State Representative. Sir, I'm going to give you the last word.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I just hope that people, Republicans, and I hope those that are independents and those Democrats that haven't drunk enough of the Kool-Aid of the liberal wokeness, seriously will consider voting for me, because to me, I don't talk the talk, I walk the walk. All you got to do is look at my website, TEDDAVISFOR, and you will see everything about me. All the bills I've done in the years I've been up there, all the appropriations I've gotten, all the awards I've gotten, recognitions I've gotten, all the committees I've chaired, all of those things. And it's just, once again, I don't talk the talk, I walk the walk. And I'd like to continue to walk that walk for the people here in Hanover County.
I am honored to know you as both a fellow Republican and as a good friend. Thank you for joining us tonight for the podcast. All the best to you, sir.
Thank you, Reuel.